Assalamu alaikum everyone. I'm back today with yet another exciting story titled Oliver Twist. Yes, this is a very famous story and most of you might have also read it throughout, but this is just an abridged version, a small extract, a small part of the story. And let's find out some important insights about this, about the author, and some very interesting facts about Oliver Twist that you might have never read before. Okay, so the learning targets for today's class will be you will be learning about the author who is Charles Dickens and the plot of Oliver Twist, the main story, the main idea, whatever happens all around the story, followed by some important themes, some social issues which we should be considering in our daily lives, and the main characters which are present in Oliver Twist. And lastly, a pictorial storyboard, which is the most interesting part, and we leave this to a surprise till the end. Now, let's find out some very interesting facts about the author Charles Dickens. He was born in England and he left school in an early age because his father was imprisoned. He had to work in a factory, and due to his very little education and lack of resources, he succeeded in his writing passion. He started editing a weekly journal for 20 years and wrote hundreds of novels and short stories and non-fiction articles. And these articles went very famous, and he campaigned constantly for children's rights too. He was very much into the social cause, and he was generally regarded as the greatest novelist towards the 20th century, and his work was fully recognized by critics and scholars. And one of his famous work is which we are going to have an insight about, Oliver Twist. And in today's time even he is a very popular author in the general public and in the youth too. Okay, so an overview about Oliver Twist, a summary, a brief introduction, which will tell you how the story revolves around, what happens. So it all starts with Oliver Twist, a child of unknown parentage, meaning his parents were unknown, and he was born to a workhouse and he was brought up there in the same place under very cruel conditions to which pauper children, pauper means poor, they were formerly exposed, meaning in the olden times these children were generally treated very cruelly, unfairly. And the tyrant, the harsh person, the ruler, a very unfair, unjust ruler, whose hands he specially suffered being, was named Bumble, which we will be covering in the next slide too. Who is he? Mr. Bumble, the parish beadle, meaning the owner of the community. After experience of an unhappy journey, which means apprenticeship, he runs away. He runs away where? To London, and he falls into the hands of a gang of thieves ultimately. And this is the point where our story ends in our novels, in our books too. And this is the point where we need to know all about Oliver Twist. And if you wish to read more about Oliver Twist, you can read the whole novel for sure. And I'm sure it would be a very interesting experience. Coming over to the two main themes on which Oliver Twist is based upon, the first one is theme of poverty. The theme of poverty is obviously related to the theme of society and class. These both themes can be interrelated. But while society and class theme is concerned to show actually how society was built up, how the system was built up in that time, so the author is very concerned in showing how miserable the lower classes, meaning the class or the middle class or where Oliver Twist belonged to, they were treated, how they were treated, and how the lower classes were mistreated. With Oliver Twist, he doesn't shy away. The author does not shy away from showing the actual conditions of the poor people, how they lived in misery, how the real picture was of their lives. So, poverty and social class are interrelated themes. Coming to the second main theme, which is theme of criminality. Because crime was a huge problem in London around 1830s. It was popular and there were street crimes basically. So Charles Dickens also made a point of writing as it is now in London too. Novels and plays about crime were hugely popular back then, and novelists basically wrote about crime just to inform the public and people and the possible solutions of how crime can be overcome. But basically, this author on Oliver Twist, he made a very important point. He wanted to show how really criminals lived and how they had a real face in their societies. And the main aim of showing this real face of the criminals was to discourage the poor people like Oliver Twist from turning into crime. For example, he ends up in stealing handkerchiefs and robbing other people by joining some other kids too. So Oliver Twist is portrayed a poor kid in getting into street crimes and how he eventually gets out of this because of his moral values and his good traits inside him. So Charles Dickens made a point to show this side of the poor people and the overall society's image based upon criminality. Here we have a very spot on flowchart which highlights the social issues which were based in Oliver Twist as the basis of the story. I'll just follow the Oliver Twist flowchart and just briefly explain you what were the issues. Oliver Twist, moving to the right, powerlessness of child and woman because they were inferior characters, not very dominant like men in those times. Coming down, other social issue like chain snatching, pickpocketing, like I mentioned earlier, these are the types of street crimes. Mob mentality. Mob mentality means the mentality or the state of mind of common people, a group of people, a mass people thinking alike, having the same set of mind and their thinking. The last box, city versus countryside, the main difference between the traditions and the norms of a city versus a countryside where poor people mainly lived, and how their issues, their problems were focused by this author. Main characters, the first one and the most primarily, Oliver Twist. He is defined as a very divine child. He was good natured and he was pure at heart. Oliver was overall a good human being, as portrayed in the story. And another fact was that he was the first child protagonist in any English novel being written in that time. And because Oliver was an orphan and he used to work in a workhouse, so the author basically criticizes the public policies which were in those wards or in those workhouses and how orphans were treated or mistreated very poorly back in England. Mr. Bumble, the antagonist and the bad character of the story, yet very important. Mr. Bumble is the beadle of the parish, a fat man who takes great joy in abusing those below him. He has fun actually, treating or mistreating the poor kids and the orphans, and is often offended by their impositions on him. Basically, he does not like anyone ruling over him. And the pompous and the self-centered beadle, again, which means an officer of a minor church. He was there working for the workhouse where Oliver was born, and he treated Oliver very badly. And later he handed him over to Mr. and Mrs. Sowerberry later in the story. The wait is over, and finally, we have reached the storyboard, the most interesting part. I found this very, very fun and precise to explain you how the story flows in a pictorial manner. I'll go from the first box on the left hand side, and this will be moving towards the right and then beneath in the same manner. The first box, Oliver Twist was born in a house nearby where his mother was collapsed and she was hurt and she gave birth to him and eventually died giving birth to him. And later, after some time, Oliver Twist was shifted to a workhouse. He had no family. He started living with other orphan kids. Everybody in the workhouse was really hungry because they were only fed one small bowl of gruel. Gruel means porridge at night. This is the third box I was talking about. Coming down, the first box again, one day, what happens was everybody voted for Oliver Twist to go and ask Mr. Bumble for more food when dinner came because all of them were hungry and they were afraid to ask him. So they opted for Oliver Twist to go and grudge up to ask for more porridge. But what happens was when Oliver Twist meets the old Mr. Bumble, the cruel Mr. Bumble, everybody had eaten, but Oliver had went up to the master and whispered the very famous line, "Please, sir, I want some more." The master shouted at him and beated him very badly. He never knew and expected this would happen to him. The last box, the owner of the workhouse put up a sign outside the workhouse to sell Oliver off to anyone and whoever would take him up for £5. This was the price he had set, and eventually he was sold. This is just the point where our story ends in our novels, in your books, ORCs, and you need to know up until here as per our course. But again, if the suspense continues and you urge to read more, you are always, always welcome to read Oliver Twist, and trust me, you will find it very interesting. Time to practice. Now, I've given you a very famous extract, a very fun and an easy one. You'll enjoy doing it and you will learn definitely. This is the famous scene of the workhouse where Oliver asks for more food and the story turns around. This is the climax of the story, and this is the very extract. I've also provided you with the vocabulary. Some vocabulary words are there, so it will be much easier for you to comprehend and attempt the questions. All you have to do is read throughout the extract and answer the three questions beneath on obviously separate sheets. And let's hope you read more and get to know more about Oliver Twist and what happens to him in the actual story. Good luck!